Hello and welcome everyone. Wherever you are joining us from, we are happy to bring to you the LAist and KPCC AMA Ask Me Anything on pregnancy and childbirth. I'm Mariana Dale and I report on early childhood here. Although I won't be the one answering your questions this evening, we have some wonderful guests and I will introduce you to them in just a minute. For the first time in a very, very long time, I am talking to you from the Crawford Family Forum here in Pasadena versus my living room or my closet where I record most of my radio stories. We are here thanks to Gordon and Donna Crawford. They have generously supported the news, information, and programming that you hear on KPCC and LAist for years. Now, if KPCC, LAist, those are new terms for you, I can introduce you to how things work around here. We are your local public media station. You are the public in public media. So all of the stories that you read online at LAist, all of the stories you hear on KPCC 89.3 are made possible by our members. If you are in the position where you feel like you can financially support this work, support events like the ones that you see tonight, we are going to encourage you to become a member, and you can do that at support.kpcc.org/in-person. We'll drop a link in the chat so that you know exactly where to go. And if you want to stay up to date on the events that we do, like the one you'll be watching here tonight, you can sign up for our events newsletter. We're also going to drop that link in the chat. And speaking of the chat, I want to do a little technological explanation tonight. So the chat is where you can talk with us. This event is about you, your ideas, your experiences, and your questions. So I would encourage you to participate in the chat. You can start by introducing yourself and telling us where you are joining from. That's also a place where you can get technical support. No worries if you're having any troubles. We want to know about it so that we can get it fixed. This night is also about your questions. And so if you have questions for our guests this evening, you are going to use the ask function. There's a little button that says ask. It should be close to where the chat is. And if you can't find it for some reason, just ask for help in the chat and we will get you set up. So happy that you're here tonight with us and ready to get started talking about pregnancy, this time of enormous transition, but also a time where you might feel a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of information that is out there. It is confusing. It can occasionally be troublesome or just really not helpful. And so tonight we wanted to create a space where you could come with your questions, no question too small or too big, and hear from a panel of experts, people who have lived and breathed pregnancy and childbirth and early childhood for years and years, and you would get to hear directly from them. And so I'm super excited to introduce you to these people that I have been talking up for the last couple of minutes. They are really the stars of the show this evening. Denise Cervantes is a parent coach and psychotherapist. She's worked with low-income families for more than 15 years and currently works as the resource and outreach supervisor and as a home visitor at the Welcome Baby pilot program at Maternal and Child Health Access. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Denise. And I would also want to introduce Brandy Jordan. Brandy is a doula and founder of a pregnancy and postpartum resource center called the Cradle Company. She's also a specialist in many things, including newborn care, sleep, and breastfeeding. And if her voice sounds familiar, it's because you might have heard it on her podcast, Dear Doula. Welcome, Brandy.
Thank you so much for having me.
And finally, I am super excited to welcome Charlene Amy, a nurse and the perinatal manager at MLK Community Healthcare in Los Angeles. She oversees labor and delivery, postpartum, and the nursery, and she's also worked as a parent educator. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we want to learn a little bit more about everyone that's watching tonight. So we've got a couple of poll questions. It's another way to participate. You can see where those are when you open up the chat. And the first question that we have for you all is, how do you identify? Tell us if you're pregnant, if you've had a baby in the last year, you're a supporter of a pregnant person, or you are just here to learn. And so the first question I want to pose to our guests tonight is, what is one thing that people should be thinking about during pregnancy that they usually aren't thinking about, or you find that they're like surprised to find out that's something that should be on their mind? And Brandy, if you want to start us off.
Day one when they come home from the hospital. I think that there's so much focus on those 9 months and getting to the birth that sometimes postpartum is a little glossed over during that time. And, having a postpartum plan, like having a village that you have in place to support you, either with just some help around the house with baby, it could be a doula, it could be grandma, just having that in place, because I think people underestimate, one, how much sleep they're gonna actually get, what really goes into feeding a newborn, and the level of exhaustion that they might be feeling they might not have anticipated.
Got it. And Charlene, what do you think people should be thinking about as they're getting ready for this experience?
I agree with that, but also I think they should think about where they plan to deliver, because all facilities don't offer the same services. So I think that's something that they should take into consideration, whether you plan to have a tubal ligation, if you plan to have your baby circumcised, if you're previous C-section, all of those things come into play. So I think that's one thing that should be considered.
Yeah, and I'm curious, just to follow up on that really quick, I think maybe people might think, they might have an idea of where it is they want to give birth, and what are some of the factors that they might be thinking about when choosing like which location is best, whether that's a hospital or at home or at a birth center or something like that?
I think it depends on several factors. If you're a high-risk pregnancy, I think it would be best to deliver in a hospital. If you've had previous C-sections and you plan to have a vaginal delivery, then you should look for a facility that will accommodate those needs. There's just different factors that should be considered depending on how you plan to birth.
Got it. And Denise, something else people should be thinking about. We've got the day after they get home and also where they're having the baby.
I really think you need to think about what your support system looks like, and that means that you want to surround yourself with people that are going to uplift you, that are going to give you the right kind of guidance that you need in that moment, and not just kind of that blanket advice. It's really easy for us to think about all the negative things that can happen during pregnancy, during birth, and in the postpartum period. But thinking about surrounding yourself with those people who are going to build you up and that are going to be there for you, as well as looking for those supports within your community if you don't have them within your family. There's many out there.
Got it. And we are hearing back from folks. It sounds like the majority of people that are watching right now are new parents. They've had a baby in the last year, followed by people that are supporting pregnant folks, as well as people who are just here to learn. So that gives you a sense of who we have watching at this point in the conversation. Now, we'd love to hear from our audience one more time about maybe you've already started to think about these things that Charlene mentioned, where you plan to birth. If you have that figured out already, we'd just love to hear from you. Our options that we gave, because we can only pick 4, but we think they're pretty all-encompassing, is birthing center, home, hospital, or I don't know yet, which is totally fine. And in the meantime, I'd love to hear from you all about, regardless of what type of care someone is seeking, whether it's midwifery care or working with an OBGYN, a doula, some combination of all 3 of those, what are questions that you would encourage people to ask of their providers during their pregnancy? And Denise, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it's just depending on where you're at in your journey and thinking about, does this feel right? So a lot of the times when we're going through the course of pregnancy, we have a feeling in our body. We don't always know what that is. Making sure you're asking those questions of your provider, making sure that they're answering your questions in a way that you understand is really important. And if they're asking you or they're letting you know, I need you to do this test, or it's recommended that you have this or that you take this medication, always make sure that you're asking the question, why? Because you want to make sure that you're making an informed decision for yourself and for your unborn baby. And we really don't question our providers enough, and I think it's a really important thing to always ask is why, and make them explain it to you until you understand.
And before we get to the responses from our other guests, I want to remind our audience that this event is really about you and your experiences and your questions. We have some questions that we've gotten ahead of time that we would love to ask, but really this event is about giving you the opportunity to get any type of question answered by the folks that we have with us here tonight. And so, Charlene, what's one question that you'd love to hear families bringing in as they're coming to see you at MLK?
I welcome any question that they have, and I try to provide a good explanation for whatever questions they have. And I agree with Denise. I think that parents or the support person as well should I'm sorry, I have
It's
allergies.
all right.
They should feel comfortable with the provider. If you're seeing a provider that you don't feel comfortable with, that's not providing you the information or not supporting you through your journey, then I would suggest switching to a different provider that you feel comfortable with.
And I imagine that it's probably a little bit different at, every clinic or hospital, but I'm just wondering where you work, if someone might be considering something like switching a provider, is there someone that they can go to ask, like, who might be able to make that change?
Well, unfortunately, in the facility that I work with, we don't have a prenatal clinic associated with our clinic, so we get patients from outside clinics.
Okay.
So that would be a little different for us. But in Martin Luther King, we do have midwifery services. So we have an OB, a midwife, in-house 24 hours. So full-term pregnancies will be seen by the midwife, and the OB is there for consultation. So it's a little different in our organization.
Got it.
But I would suggest probably reaching out to a different clinic or maybe word of mouth. They do have resources. Like Denise works with Welcome Baby. They have resources that they can refer them out to, or different clinics, maybe a friend, word of mouth from a friend, to get advice on a clinician that would be appropriate for them.
Yeah, and is there anyone whose job, like within the hospital, it is to like kind of advocate for patients or be kind of like a resource navigator? I'm just curious.
As far as switching to a different provider?
Yeah, I think, or like a different, doctor or something like that.
No, we don't have anyone in-house.
Got it.
We can refer them to social services or case management that may be able to help them, but we don't have anyone in particular.
No, that's good to know. And Brandy, something that you think folks should be asking of their providers?
Well, I think first, in the way that parents generally get connected to a provider is usually a referral, or maybe they were already seeing them for gynecological services. And just like if they were interviewing for their kids' preschool, they want to do the same thing with providers. You don't necessarily have to take the person who's been seeing you. You need to shop around a little bit, because in that space, the same feeling that you want to feel when you're delivering this baby, you should be feeling when you're having your time with your doctor, when you're asking questions about your pregnancy, your birth, et cetera. And if they're not feeling that, I want them to understand they're going to probably feel that same way when they're actually at delivery time. And so beyond just the specific questions they're asking providers, they really need to be shopping around, seeing if their answers if they're getting answers to their questions in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, validated. If they have specific ways that they want to birth, they want to make sure that they're getting a doctor that is okay with that shares that philosophy or at least supports it. But they can't do that. They're not asking enough questions and seeing, how it feels to be in different spaces.
Got it.
And I would say to
Yeah.
add to that, depending on the insurance carrier, some patients have insurance where they're capitated to certain hospitals or physicians, so they would probably have to reach out to that insurance carrier to see if they would be able to change or to refer them to another physician as well.
Excuse me. So So we did hear back from our audience. It looks like at this point, most of the people that are watching are planning to birth in a hospital. And we do have 20% of folks that haven't quite figured it out yet. So hopefully this is something that is useful that they can carry with them. And I want to take a moment to share back some of the wisdom that we've already started to receive from the community. In my work as a reporter, I have the privilege of talking to parents, talking to providers, talking to people who have walked this journey. And so I wanted to share a little bit of what they had shared with me recently. And so Erica Moliner is a mother in Upland who dealt with some health conditions during her pregnancy. And I just thought that, this was a really solid piece of advice and kind of echoes a little bit what we've heard from you all, that people should really feel empowered to ask questions of their providers, and not only ask questions, but get answers that make sense to them and that they think are useful to them. So we are starting to get some questions from our audience. Yay. That was my favorite part about this, is the chance to interact with you all, because I get to ask questions all the time. I'm really excited about hearing more of your questions. So this person asks, are there reputable birthing centers in LA you could recommend, looking for options other than hospitals? And Brandy, since you're a doula, I thought maybe I would direct this to you. What have you heard about birthing centers? And maybe for our audience who might not know what a birthing center is, if you could give a little bit of background on that.
So for a lot of people who are considering to have a vaginal birth that is without interventions, they might be considering having a home birth. And for some people, a home birth might be just something a little too far on that end for themselves. And they want to feel a little bit more, they don't necessarily want the hospital experience, but they want to have access to those same things that you might see in a hospital. And so a birth center is a place where you can go to have your baby. You will be being served by a midwife, and they will usually have a team of a birth assistant, and possibly they have a doula on staff, and they're really focused on working with people who have low-risk pregnancies to be able to have what some would call natural childbirth, and I'll just say a birth without intervention. And for many people, it's a great in-between. Like, they don't have necessarily that clinical feel of being in the hospital, and so you'll see that it'll have like a very homey feel to it. You might have a private room with a nice bathtub. There's more accessories to kind of have families go in there and take their time in the same way they would in a home setting. You do go home after the birth, which some people don't realize. With a home birth, you're not staying overnight. There's usually about a 6-hour window where they are monitoring you, make sure that you and baby are fine, and then you're going home and spending that night in your bed or that daytime in your bed. And so for some people, it's a great in-between. Some people might have a home situation where they don't feel comfortable doing a home birth. Maybe they're on, a third-floor apartment and they don't want to do it in their apartment, or they have, roommates, neighbors, et cetera. And so it can be a great way to do that. As far as saying, recommending a birth center, there's so many factors that go into that. Yes, there are reputable birth centers in Los Angeles and LA County, but it really comes down to what your family needs, what your values are. And so like I would say with birthing at a hospital, you're gonna wanna shop around. If you Google birth center Los Angeles, you will have a couple that will come up. You wanna go visit them. You wanna talk to them. You wanna see that this space feels like a place where you feel like you could really be comfortable and relaxed.
And Charlene, I'm curious if you sometimes receive transfers from birth centers and how that's handled in a hospital for people that might not know that that's something that happens sometimes.
We do receive transfers from the birthing centers, and mainly for those that are requesting pain intervention. Like I said, we do have the midwifery services, so our service is a little, it's not as far removed from the birthing center, because we do allow patients to labor the way that they like. We have birthing balls, we do spinning baby techniques. Our midwives do allow them to take their time in labor. We're not really aggressive with it. So in that aspect, it's similar to the birthing centers, but yes, we do get lots of transfers. Some maybe because of presentation of the baby. If there's a breech presentation, of course, they can't deliver at the birthing center, but mainly for those that require pain medication or pain interventions.
Maria, I just wanted to follow up on that and say, it should be noted that many hospitals aren't going to be a welcoming place for a transfer. And so people should know that and be asking those questions of their midwife. There are some hospitals that are very welcoming of people who want to have home births or birth in a birthing center and are open to transfers. And there are some hospitals who think they're basically doing something crazy and they don't get treated very nicely when they come with the transfer. So that's a conversation they're going to want to have with their provider to see what relationships they have and with what hospitals, so they know what they're kind of up against if they have to transfer.
Yeah.
Yes,
And we're
I
getting,
agree,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Because all hospitals aren't the same. I have worked at several organizations, and particular organization I'm with now, we do welcome doulas, we have our midwives, so, you know, it's a different experience.
And so we are getting some questions about pregnancies over 40. Someone asks, are there age restrictions for a birth center or a home birth? Is that something people should be thinking about? And if anyone wants to jump in on that one, I'll let y'all volunteer.
I mean, I would say that the majority of my clients are somewhere between 35 and 45. So I'll just say that for someone who's considering over 40, it's done a lot, particularly for those of you who are in LA County and surrounding. With that being said, it's not so much an age requirement, it's going to be the pregnancy itself. Birth centers and home births are for low-risk pregnancies. Obviously, if you're over 40, and then particularly over 42, you may be considered to have a more high-risk pregnancy. Obviously, it can depend on your health history, what's going on with your baby, and some of that you just won't know until you get pregnant with your baby. And so it's really going to depend on your specific pregnancy. But there are plenty of people over 40 having babies at home and with, at a birth center.
But we also need to think about preconception health as well, and I think that's an area that a lot of people don't focus on, like you were saying. You really want to focus before you get pregnant, and if you're intending to get pregnant, you really want to focus on how your health is doing, making sure that you're getting your annual physicals, your blood work, your checkup, and making sure that you're taking care of yourself before you jump into that journey. It's really important.
No, thank you for adding that, because I think, you just think that this journey starts like when you're pregnant
Right.
versus like in the years leading up or months leading up to when you might want to get pregnant.
And I'd also like to add that at the birthing centers, they do monitor those pregnant women, and if they deem them to be high risk, they will refer them out.
Got it. And another question in the similar topic, is taking progesterone necessary during pregnancy? And, I would say that just a reminder for folks that what we're hearing tonight is it's not necessarily your doctor's advice, though we are drawing on people's specific experiences that are up here on the stage with us, but I just want to keep that in mind so that also you all feel comfortable knowing that you're just speaking to the experiences that you have. But that being said, does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I would say that's a question that would have to be referred to the physician.
Yeah.
Depending on what's going on with that pregnancy, if it's a high risk for miscarriage, things like that, that would have to be referred to that physician.
I'm going to assume that maybe this person has been told they might need to take that. And so, again, not every pregnancy is it necessary to take progesterone for people who aren't aware of that process. It is not something that would be normal to a low-risk pregnancy, but there might be specific things related to your birthing history, miscarriages, high-risk, IVF, things like that might make it more high-risk, that you might be recommended that, and it might be the right choice for you.
And is there anything else people should be keeping in mind if they are trying to get pregnant or have a child when they're over 40? Denise, I really appreciated what you shared, but I don't know if there's other advice that you all would want to share.
Definitely. I think specifically right now, because we are dealing with a formula shortage, knowing that many of the hormones that we need to get pregnant are the same ones we need to be able to produce enough milk to feed our baby. And so if you are someone who's needing some support to get pregnant, or you are already considered to be high risk, you want to be thinking about a lactation plan post-pregnancy, so that you are seeing someone when you're pregnant or before even having a baby. Have a session with a lactation consultant, and they can give you more information about your body, things that you might need to know that are going to increase your chances of being able to breastfeed if that's something that you want to do.
And anything you'd want to add, Charlene?
I agree. And if you're over the age of 40 and you plan to become pregnant, then I would suggest seeing your OBGYN and coming up with a preconception plan to get your body ready for that process.
And that is a perfect segue, because we are also getting some questions about infant feeding. One person writes, I'm thinking about foregoing breastfeeding and using formula only from the start. Someone else is saying that they want to do mixed feeding with formula and breast milk so that they can kind of share responsibilities for feeding with their partner. Any tips? And Denise, I'll start with you.
I really think it's a very personal decision. And you have to think about what's working for you and what's working for the baby. And if one is working for one and one isn't working for the other, then you have to think about being okay with adjusting to what's working. So if you want to start on the journey with breastfeeding, of course, we're going to encourage you to do so. And we're going to encourage you to be successful by reaching out to a lactation consultant at any point in your journey. And there's a lot of them available even at hospitals, clinics, as well as WIC programs that are all there, and they're part of your insurance coverage if you have it. So, just thinking about what's working for you, getting that support that you need, and if one isn't working, don't be afraid or ashamed to ask for help or support when you need it, and, making that successful transition into formula if that's what you need.
I just want to address one of the comments. It said that they wanted to maybe start with formula and then transition. And so it's things like that where I feel like they definitely want to be able to talk to a lactation consultant, even if you want to use formula. Part of our job is to be able to support you in that as well. And the reason I was mentioning that particular comment is that sometimes people do things not having the full scope of like what happens. So for example, if this client, it was my client, and they started off with formula for those first couple of weeks, and then I saw them at 1 month postpartum and they wanted to be able to breastfeed, we're probably very decreased possibility that they're going to be able to exclusively breastfeed, because the beginning, those first couple of weeks are actually the most important to establish that milk supply. And so if I have a client who wants to do mixed feeding, or they know they want to get a partner involved in feeding, we can come up with a plan so they get to actually decide having the best information. And so that's something I would say, just talk to a lactation consultant so that you can make a plan that feels good to you, whether that's formula or breastfeeding, but get that information so that you can set up yourself properly.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I agree. I would say to educate yourself so that you can come to an informed decision. Also, if I think the comment was she wanted to supplement feed so that her husband could feed. There's also pumping. You could pump and, have the milk readily available in bottles for her husband to feed. So that would be one option. But I would say just to become informed so that she makes the right decision.
Yeah, and when's the right time to talk to a lactation consultant?
Today.
Right now.
And just a reminder that breast pumps are covered through any type of insurance program. So making sure that you're asking for that in your 3rd trimester of pregnancy, get that ordered, get it ready to go so you have it at your doorstep when you need it.
They say that most people have decided by 32 weeks in pregnancy what they're going to do for as far as feeding their baby. And so I would recommend that people are having conversations about lactation, formula, as soon as they know they're pregnant. Go to a prenatal breastfeeding class. Don't just talk to your friends, because they had a different situation, they have different health history, and so what they're saying it's like doesn't mean it's going to be that way for you, and that's positive or negative. So have those conversations early, get educated, so that if there is some issue that you can kind of work and try to prevent, we want to do that really early.
And someone has a follow-up question, which I am super excited about, because I feel like it means that the people that are listening know that if they didn't get the full answer that they wanted the first time around, that you should come back and ask the question again. So I love to hear that. This person wants to know more about preconception health, which is something that Denise had mentioned. What is it, and what should people be thinking about in terms of their health before they're conceiving?
So thinking about your lifestyle choices. Are you a heavy drinker? Are you a smoker? Thinking about some of those things that may potentially affect a pregnancy. Making sure that you're having your annual physicals with your doctor, getting up to date on any vaccines that you may be behind on if you're choosing to vaccinate yourself, and making sure that your health is in optimal shape for where you're at and for yourself. And the only way we can do that is by having that positive relationship with our medical providers and our medical home. So I think that's just a great baseline to start, and just making sure that your health is where it needs to be for your age.
Yeah, any additions? Charlene? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Charlene. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say that prenatal vitamins. A lot of times people are taking that when they find out they're pregnant, and really at that point the baby's already drawing from your minerals and your bones, et cetera. And so for those who are of childbearing years and want to actually know they want to have kids, start taking them. It's just like taking a vitamin so that your body's actually ready. And so when you are growing this baby, those first couple of weeks are the most important. We're talking about brain development and structure. And so if you have those extra nutrients already, it's going to be very helpful to your pregnancy.
And I was just going to echo the same thing. So.
No, I think that reinforces the expertise here when there's consensus, although I will say I would welcome any kind of debate about anything as well. Someone else asked, how can a family find a doula that is funded to serve vulnerable populations? And this question's coming from someone that's in the Inglewood and Hawthorne area. Any tips for finding a doula?
Well, I would say California, particularly LA County, is lucky in this area that there are a lot of programs that are specific for underserved communities. There is the AIM program that are offering free doulas. There are programs particularly that are focused on Black maternal health that are offering doulas to Black pregnant moms, but there are other ones just for people who might have Medi-Cal. I know through HealthNet they were doing programs that provided the opportunity to be able to get a doula. But look for community doula programs. They are abundant in this area. I know they have some in the Inland Empire. It is something that is very unique to California, and I feel like the government, the city, the state is understanding the needs of maternal health, and they are trying to fill those needs.
And one update I can share is that we actually have a guide on how to find a doula, what to look for in a doula that we've published on LAist. We'll drop the link in the chat so that you know where to find it. And it has a huge list of resources, different types of providers. And like Brandy mentioned, there are several programs that offer free doula services for people from specific populations. Sometimes it is geographically linked, depending on where you live in the county. Sometimes it's linked to other factors. And another update that everyone can be kind of watching out for is that California is going to start funding doula services through Medi-Cal. That is something that is in the works, so it's not available yet, but it's scheduled to be happening sometime in 2023. So that's something that people can keep in mind as well. Someone else writes to us, I'm thinking about getting pregnant and I'm very scared of the delivery experience. What should I know?
It's a really great question. So I think, talking to other people, of course, you want to make sure that these are positive people that are sharing positive experiences with you. You don't always want to hear the negativity of things. And as humans in general, we do something called mental filtering where it's really easy for us to remember all the bad things. But asking somebody about their positive things. What did you like about birth? What do you wish could have happened? Making sure that you're getting support from somebody like a doula or a midwife to answer those questions about the birthing process, or joining a home visiting program. There's many throughout LA County. So I think that's another good way to start, to get all of that background information to prepare you. Taking a class. Classes are available at most facilities, health clinics, or through your insurance. You can also call and ask them, where can I take a class on childbirth education? There's so many out there, and I think the more informed you are, the better you are able to make a plan about how you wish your birth to go. And that just makes you feel more in control about the process, I think.
Right. And I would say keep an open mind. And I don't necessarily agree with the speak to other people, because you get lots of bad advice and that could scare you even more. So I would say, I agree, take the prenatal classes. I think I would probably say 90% of my patients don't take prenatal classes, and it makes it even worse. So educate yourself before you get to the hospital, and that way you know what to expect. But keep an open mind. I know lots of, especially for the Hispanic population, they don't like epidurals because their grandmother didn't have an epidural and the great-grandmother. Keep an open mind. You may need an epidural. You may not have the same tolerance that your mother or your grandmother had. So just keep an open mind and be positive and ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
And yeah, Brandy, what else do you think people can do to how do you receive that fear, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, so there is a lot of fear because you hear lots of different people's stories about what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And I would say when you think about birth, think about it's a big act of releasing, and it's hard to do that when you're in a state of fear. And so the way to fix that is going to be to attend classes, to talk to people who are giving you a full view of what it can be. I think that, the idea of whether someone wants an epidural or not, I don't think it's necessarily related to race or ethnicity. I think it really depends on that person and what their goal is for their birth, what makes them feel like it's something that really is aligned with their values. And so when it comes to whether it should be without intervention or with intervention, I think that they need to really focus on first just having people, and I mean the providers, in a space where they feel really, really safe. And I validate that fear. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what it's going to be like for you. But I will say that although, particularly in the United States, we have very much medicalized birth, it is something that people have been doing for a long time. It is a natural event that could possibly have some issues. And the more you're educated, the less fearful you'll be.
And I want to take a moment to just thank our audience for all of the amazing questions that we have gotten so far. It makes me so happy that people are out there looking for information and have found their way to us. And I want to also introduce you guys to a new project that we're going to be launching in the coming months. So KPCC and LAist are going to be answering even more of your questions about pregnancy. We are going to be talking about how to advocate for yourself, how to navigate complicated things like paid leave and the fourth trimester. And it's going to be primarily through text. So your phone is probably not too far away from you right now. If you could pick it up and text "Hey BB" to 73224, you will find out more about this service. And I think something that's really special is that you'll actually have a chance to shape it. We hope that your questions, your ideas, and your experiences can lead to the creation of resources that help inform and educate other people here in Southern California. And we're really excited about this new project that's coming up. And I also want to take a chance to share another type of pregnancy experience that we haven't talked about yet. I was doing some interviews a couple of months ago about pregnancy loss and what it's like to get pregnant after that. Jasmine Godinez Gomez down in Long Beach shared this with us. And I wanted to know if you all can reflect a little bit on some things people might consider if they are planning to conceive or planning for pregnancy after they've experienced a loss.
I'm just so glad that we're bringing this up because the statistics are that 1 in 4 women experience miscarriage. And so I think if we can all normalize that this is something that happens, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to go on and to have a healthy pregnancy. I think that the more that we talk about it when we're having them, a lot of people are suffering in silence. They don't tell anyone when they've had a loss. And I think that's changing, particularly in the past couple of years. People are announcing their pregnancies early. We used to wait just in case there was a miscarriage. And I think the more that we have these conversations, it will normalize that this is something that happens quite often for people, and it does not necessarily have a bearing on whether or not you're going to go on to have, many or one healthy child.
Agreed. I think it's also important to, if you need those grief and loss resources, to understand that those are out there for you. It's okay to have a mixed emotion when you've had a loss prior. When you birth this new baby, it might come with feelings of joy and sadness at the same time. And it's important to acknowledge both of those things because it is a joyous and a sad occasion at the same time because you're still grieving. But mental health support is something that should be normalized across the board, and it's okay to reach out and talk to somebody if that's the type of support that you need. It can be with a support group for people that have lost pregnancies themselves. It can be an individualized therapy experience or a family experience, and I think it's just something that we normalize in our program, and I think it should be normalized across the board that it's okay to reach out and talk about that.
I agree. I think grief counseling is really great. I think it affects the loss of one baby will affect the next pregnancy because moms are still holding on to that. So I think having that counseling really helps.
Mariana, I just wanted to mention one resource that's been really helpful for my clients, and it's something called birth story medicine. And it's really just being able to tell the story. Oftentimes, people have already had a dream for this baby. They have a name, they have all the things, and it kind of just gets cut off and they don't ever talk about it again. And so there are people, practitioners who tend to come from, maternal child health field that will sit with them and they get to talk through about this person that they were carrying inside of them and like what those dreams are and be able to speak through that grief. And for a lot of people, that can be very healing.
And something that we have learned in recent years, but that has been known for, literally decades at this point, is that the rates of infant and maternal mortality for Black mothers is far higher than it is for mothers of other races and ethnicities and the population as a whole. At one point here in LA County, they were Black babies were 3 times more likely than white babies to not reach their first birthday. What is some advice that you all would specifically have for Black moms, and how do you balance those awful sounding statistics, what are truly horrifying statistics, with the reality of wanting to create this joyous birth experience for your own family?
I first want to just say to a Black mom who might be watching this or is thinking about getting pregnant or is pregnant, I am here. I have 3 children. They are at home. They are healthy. I'm alive. They're alive. And I think there's so much talk about the demise that we forget about allowing people to have the joy of the pregnancy and not just focusing on the terrible things that can happen. Not to say that things don't happen. I've told this story many times. For my 3rd baby, I was denied a hospital room in LA County because the doctor didn't believe I was in labor. And his exact words were, "It doesn't matter that you think you're in labor. It matters that I think you're in labor." And so 45 minutes later, I had my baby. But it's because I had people around me who could advocate. I had a doula, and I had a partner with me. And so I would just say to Black women, have support systems around you. If you get a vibe that people aren't listening to you, change providers. And so I think more so than talking about all the terrible things that can happen, I really like to focus on how many resources are available to you, that you have the right to change providers. And if people aren't listening to you, you take up more space and you get louder.
I 100% agree. It's all about educating yourself, knowing warning signs, knowing the risk, and, like she said, having the support system there. I like to say bring your support person with you when you take those classes so that not only you're educated, they're educated as well, and they can look out for signs that something may be wrong. And if you feel like there's something wrong, then 9 times out of 10, there's something wrong. So speak up. Don't be afraid to speak up. I think that's one of the problems is that as a whole, women are just afraid they don't want to sound like they don't know what's going on or like it's a stupid question. No question is a stupid question. Speak up.
Anything you'd share?
Agreed. I actually had a very similar experience with my second born, is that, I'm not a Black woman. I am a Hispanic Latina woman. However, I knew that my baby was coming, and the doctor proceeded to tell me, I'm going to go home and I'm going to take a nap for a little while because this baby isn't going to be here for a few hours. And lo and behold, about half an hour later, here he was into the world. So I think it's just, again, to circle back to your point, is that you really need to advocate for yourself. And if you're coming up against barriers, talk to somebody else and keep talking to those people until they're able to listen to you, because you know your body better than anybody else, even a known doctor. So if you feel like something is coming up for you, make sure you speak up about it.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add to that, Mariana, that, there's a misconception that, it's because people aren't getting prenatal care or they've done something that has made them more high risk. And so I want to just make it very clear that it is not about socioeconomic status. It's not about education. We know that a Black woman with a PhD is more, like 3 times more likely to die than their white counterpart who didn't finish high school. So it's not about those things. It is about bias. And so you want to make sure that the people that you are choosing to birth with, accept you, accept your culture, that you feel seen, validated, and heard, and those things will keep you safe.
Right. And I think it always starts with your prenatal care. Make sure you're comfortable with your provider, your doula, your midwife, anyone that you're seeing, your clinician, whoever that may be. Make sure that you're comfortable with them and that you feel like you have a voice, that they're listening to you.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you all is that people have so much agency to create a situation where they can be comfortable, they can be supported, and they can ultimately be set up to have this joyous, healthy birth.
Yes, but I think I don't want to also perpetuate this myth of the strong Black woman, because I think that often is what prevents them from getting the care that they need, because, they should be stronger. They don't feel pain the same way. In that moment when I knew what I had to do to bring my 3rd baby through, I didn't really have the strength to advocate this with my provider. I'm focused on bringing life into the world, and without having my doula there. And I'm someone who has 18 years of maternal child health experience. And I think about every day for the people who don't have that, who don't have the doula there, who don't have a partner there. This doctor wanted to send us home, and I can only imagine what have happened having a baby in a car by myself. And so I want people to know that regardless of like how much we know and how much we advocate for ourselves, in that moment, you need people around you because you may not have the strength to be able to have that fight with providers.
Got it. And fast forwarding a little bit, now we've had the baby in our hypothetical situation that we are imagining here. Someone asks about postpartum support. They know it's important, but it's not something that's really, they feel like, financially supported by the healthcare system. They want to know, how do you find access to things like an affordable night nurse, or how do we get insurance companies to step up and cover this? So I think two parts here. One is like, what are ways that we can access postpartum care that are affordable? And Denise, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, postpartum doulas do exist out there, and I think in your doula guide you can probably find a postpartum doula that will be able to kind of help you out in that realm, but also making sure that your village is strengthened and keeping those people around you that are there. Be specific with what you need when you ask for help. I think that's something that we don't do as humans in general. We just kind of like, well, I really need help with this. Okay, well, what do you need help with specifically? Ask for that. Say, you know what, I just need you to hold the baby for me while I take a shower. You know, it's really okay to ask for those specific needs that you have, but also making sure that you're connecting to community supports that are around you. There's so many out there, you know, from mental health providers to case management programs, home visiting programs, and then, you know, it's there. You just have to know where to look, and if you don't know where to look, call us.
Any other thoughts on affordable postpartum care?
You know, affordable, I wish I had the answer to that. I would say the ballot box is probably the first place we can start getting affordable care for families, and making sure that our elected officials start to prioritize maternal child health is probably going to be the first answer for many of us.
Shout out to the primary coming up next week. LAist voter guide. We can hook you up if you have questions about who you might be electing. And you're exactly right. There are people in positions of power that are making decisions about this kind of stuff every single day, and those people are only there because we put them in office, and you have the power to put people in office that are going to be more supportive of paying for things like this, you know, through health insurance, through Medi-Cal.
And I would say private employers also are becoming more aware of the need to support their employees who are having children. And so, you know, if you work for a corporation, you work for a law firm, start asking them, what do they have in place for postpartum? When you're looking for a job, like now, many companies are trying to retain more of their female identified employees after birth, and they can't because they're not providing the kind of services that allow them to get back to work, you know, happy, healthy, and thriving. And so pushing on those employers to be able to have those services is something that you can do. And I know that we talk about affordable services, but a lot of the people that are doing this work, doulas, newborn care specialists, lactation consultants, they are generally people who identify as female. They usually come from marginalized communities. And so when we talk about affordability, it shouldn't be coming directly from those service providers, but from the government, from employers, and not expecting those, you know, hourly workers to basically finance what should be coming through community.
I would also say probably reach out to your insurance carrier. There are services that are covered that you may not be aware of, so just reach out to see what may be covered under your insurance.
And some other advice that you have for once the baby comes. Do you have a go-to book or resource that you point people to for how to take care of babies? This person asked, now, I don't watch a lot of Star Trek, so I'm sad if I do not get this reference right, but I'm going to read it verbatim. This person asked, have we made any progress since Dr. Spock?
So Dr. Spock is not related to Star Trek. So
okay, good. See, there we go. I was just like, oh no, a cultural reference I don't understand.
I believe he was in the 50s, was like the, you know, United States pediatrician that everyone like listened to what he said, and he had books about childcare and taking care of baby. Yes, we have moved on from Dr. Spock. Would I say there is a go-to resource? Not necessarily, because it really depends on your own parenting values and what's important to you. I mean, there's books about how you should never sleep train your kid. There's books about how you should do it when they're 12 weeks. There are books about not, sleeping in the bed. There's books about co-sleeping. And so it's really going to come down to kind of starting to just play around with that stuff. Read it. Take the things you want from it. Throw away the rest, but there's a lot of things that have come out since the days of Dr. Spock. I would say if they have a more specific resource, if they're looking for something related to like nutrition or sleep, I'd be happy to give, some resources, but there are lots of things that have come since Spock.
And so for our patients, when they're discharged or once they get to postpartum, we give them a postpartum handbook, which gives lots of information about sleeping, safe sleep, SIDS, nutrition, everything postpartum depression, and there are QR codes within that booklet that they can click onto that'll take them to videos that also shows them about bathing, and it has some breastfeeding topics in there. We also have a first 48 class, which talks about the first 48 hours after postpartum, what to expect, what to do, so things like that. But there's lots of resources that you could use, lots of postpartum training, as well as the prenatal classes that will help with postpartum.
And for us, we give all of our participants in the Welcome Baby program a Welcome Baby book that goes through pregnancy all the way into early childhood development, and breastfeeding and everything in between. And so that also, again, has QR codes that links to other community support resources as well as videos. But one of my favorite books on socio-emotional health is The Whole Brain Child from Dan Siegel. And that's a really great book to just really talks about more about the bonding and attachment and building up that relationship.
And Denise, I want to take a second. You mentioned Welcome Baby, and we said at the beginning that you're a home visitor, but if people aren't familiar with what that is, can you give them a quick explanation?
Absolutely. So the Welcome Baby program has been available in LA County for about 12 years. We're at 13 different hospitals throughout the county, from Metro LA all the way out to the Antelope Valley. So just depending on where you're delivering. You can actually find more information at welcomebabysupport.org. But what we are is a free and voluntary home visitation program. During this time of pandemic, a lot of our services have kind of transformed into virtual services, meeting one-on-one over Zoom. So you're connected with a personal parent coach as well as a registered nurse who will kind of meet with you along your journey in up to 3 visits in the prenatal period and 4 visits with your parent coach in the postpartum period. You'll have 1 visit with the registered nurse once you're discharged home from the hospital. However, if you do need access to that registered nurse, as long as you're participating in the program, you'll have a medical professional there with you as well.
Got it. And we can drop a link in the chat if people are curious about home visiting and about specifically the program that you work for as well, so folks can learn more. And we do have time to fit in a couple more questions, and I am so excited that there's just been like a constant stream of questions. It's amazing. We have a couple of questions that are very 2022, shall I say. These are pandemic questions that we're having. So someone asks, how worried should pregnant women be about COVID? Even with vaccines, cases are rising in LA. How at risk is my baby?
Well, I can say for us, we haven't had one baby that tested positive, so it's not transferred from mom to baby. And even the patients that we have had that are COVID positive, they've had great outcomes. So it's no different from a regular person that would contract COVID.
Yeah, and what advice, do you have for pregnant women who are maybe trying to navigate their health now? Or even, I would say, I've heard from parents who have very young children who haven't yet been able to be vaccinated. They're thinking, can I visit, our older relatives? Can I take my baby outside or to the farmer's market? What are some things people should be considering?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things that we saw happen during the pandemic is that premature births went way down. And so we know that being forced to slow down, maybe not going into the office and contracting the cold from Susie's cubicle, et cetera, has been helpful to people in pregnancy. And so I'm hoping that from the pandemic, we will take that and start to think about there's a reason why people nested, back when, and you took off at the end of your pregnancy when possible. And I know that's not possible for every family. family. But thinking about limiting your exposure to other people at the end of your pregnancy is going to be super important. If you have a newborn, obviously limiting visitors is going to be helpful, making sure people wash their hands, wear a mask. Those are still going to be helpful to you in your pregnancy and when you have the new baby. If you have young children who are going to preschool, a lot of times they're going to be bringing these things home to you and baby. And so just taking the same protocols we would be always taking as far as like coming home and washing hands right away. If, pregnant mom is in her last few months of pregnancy or has a newborn, if you have to do pickup, drop off, that kind of thing, wearing a mask. I wouldn't say necessarily they need to be so worried about it because we are seeing good outcomes, but definitely take those precautions because we saw that they were really helpful to outcomes of pregnant women and their babies.
As well as vaccines, I think don't be afraid to get your vaccine during pregnancy because studies have shown that it does provide some immunological properties to the baby once it's born. So I think it's okay to talk to your provider if you haven't been vaccinated yet, if a vaccine is okay for you during pregnancy.
And thankfully, I work with some wonderful people who spend almost, every day thinking about COVID and thinking about its health impact. And next week, there's actually going to be another event just like this one, an AMA style, where you can ask and get answers. And it's going to be hosted by our senior health correspondent, Jackie Fortier. She's sitting down with experts. It's going to be on Wednesday, June 8th. And we'll drop the link in the chat to where you can RSVP. And they will be spending the entire hour talking about COVID and kids, talking about things like vaccines, the latest update on when we're going to have a vaccine for kids under 5, as well as what we're seeing in terms of COVID and kids who have gotten sick, things like long COVID. We want to give you the latest information in an environment that feels, safe and accessible. So I would definitely encourage you to sign up for that. And I wonder if you've seen the pandemic impact how people are able to be supported in their pregnancy and in their birth, and what are some things people should consider when they're planning, at this current stage that we're in the pandemic?
I would say definitely for the hospital births, it has impacted the support person that, some women have mother and husband that they may want there. For our organization, we're allowing one visitor to come in. We also allow a doula that's not counted as your support person. So I would say if you're going to a hospital that will only allow one visitor, that you choose that support person wisely. You want to choose a person that will be there to support you and not just be there just for the birth. You want that person to actually be there to be a support person. So that may not be your husband. You may want your mom there opposed to your husband, but it just depends on, the dynamics of your family. But I would say choose that person wisely.
I would say one of the things that we saw, because our agency basically staffs in-home support in postpartum, is we saw a huge uptick in people using our service during the pandemic because grandma couldn't fly, from New York to LA to be able to support like they might have planned prior to the pandemic. And we're seeing a lot more of that. But more importantly, I think it normalized having postpartum care that wasn't a family member. And so what we are seeing is that people are calling us because they've called 6 or 7 different people and they're all booked. And so I would say if you're thinking about it, book that person in advance, have that plan, even if it's for a week or 2 weeks. I think previously it was thought that having postpartum care was for something for people who are rich or for celebrities. And I think what we saw in the pandemic is that people who have 9-to-5 jobs, were able to get those benefits and see how useful it was to their overall postpartum experience.
We've also seen an uptick in the amount of people that are craving those home visitation support resources. So we have seen an influx of more clients kind of joining those support services, not only with doulas and midwifery, but as well as home visitors that are just there to kind of walk with you on your journey.
And I want to pivot a little bit, although I think we could link this to any number of topics that we have talked about tonight, including the pandemic, which is that we know that stress over time is bad for your health. It contributes to blood pressure and heart disease. And when you're pregnant, it can also have an impact on not only your health, but your baby's health. And so what are some things people can do to try and keep their stress levels low during pregnancy and after the baby is born?
not KPCC, but turn off the news.
No, that's valid. Even I turn the news off sometimes.
I think that, we sometimes feel like being plugged in makes you like a good citizen and that you need to know everything that's happening. But I think for a lot of people, getting this constant influx of violence and things that are happening in the world, adding to our stress is just not healthy all the time. And so I think sometimes we have to force ourselves to step off of that wheel. We don't need to be made aware of every terrible thing that's happening in the world, particularly when you're pregnant. You are, carrying a baby that's also absorbing those hormones and those stress hormones that you might have going through your body. And so I always tell them that, like, turn it off, find things that are more peaceful. You don't have to be aware of everything that's happening. And it doesn't mean that you're not, connected or you don't care about people, but it's necessary for your health.
Also, the focus around self-care. I think a lot of times we don't really think about taking care of ourselves and what we need to do for us. And that doesn't always look like a spa day or a massage, but it could just be getting some time outside, getting some time away from your norm, taking time to meditate, taking time to just de-stress and just getting to do something that is enjoyable for you, that helps you to relax. And it's not selfish, it's taking care of yourself.
I agree. Relax. I think relaxing is the main thing that you can do. Relax, eat well, exercise, and like she said, don't focus on the external stimulation that will cause you the extra stress.
So y'all here are parents. I'm wondering if you could just share something that each of you do to find that relaxation or that peace or that ease in your life.
I think it has to be scheduled in, just like your, any to-do list that you might have. I have 3 children at various ages. They're now 4, 6, and 15. And I think what has been important for me is that I still have, for lack of a better word, a life outside of my world as mother. And so I'm still doing things that make me feel happy. I'm creating, I'm having time with friends. As a couple, we spend time with each other outside of being parents and not necessarily just talking about our children. And that has been very helpful because the time that we have with them feels like really good quality time, and that we're not so drained from just the day-to-day life. And so taking that time out, but it has to be scheduled in. We're all so busy. Modern parents are both working a lot of the times, and they're doing that just to make ends meet. And so if you don't have it where it's a non-negotiable that you have that 1 hour on Saturday morning, it will just continue to get to a point of burnout.
I don't have small children, but I can say that I do take the time to, what I like to call is download. Like you download your phone, you download everything else. I take time for myself. During this pandemic, it's been really stressful, especially being in the hospital because you're under all these restrictions and you're seeing all this death and, all these bad things around. But you just have to take time for yourself, focus on yourself, download. And for me, it was really hard because I like to travel. And during that time, I haven't been able to travel. But the first chance I got to hop on a boat, I did it. I, used my precautions, of course, but I have to get away, just take time for myself and get away from everyone.
Mariana, can I just say something for the pandemic parents? And I hate to use that term, but it's like what we have now is that, new parenthood in itself can be so isolating. And on top of that, to be in a space where you couldn't even connect with other people, that you were stuck inside the house, that I feel like many of those parents have missed out on some of that bonding that happens with you and other people that you might meet in like a Parent and Me class or going to the park. And I would say go out and do that. Like, do that for yourself. I don't care if it's been 2 years and now your baby's 2.5, still go out there and find those relationships because it can be very isolating. Your relationships change when you have children, and that's something that we don't talk about enough. And so some of my closest friends I met during postpartum. And so I would say if you didn't get to do that, if you weren't a joiner in high school, it's the time to do that. Like you want to be a joiner, you want to meet with other people who are in that same kind of, I have a 2-year-old, I have a 1-year-old, and find those relationships. It's going to be very helpful to you in your parenting journey.
And Denise, what's something you do to take care of yourself as a parent?
I think for me, it's not being afraid to look within. And what that means for me is that I need to kind of take a pause and take a minute to think about what it is I need from myself right now. Do I need to get outside? Do I need to just unplug for a minute? Do I need to focus on something that's fun for me? And I think one of the best things that I like to do is making sure that I still continue to date my partner. So that helps me to unwind.
And we have heard so much that I hope everyone who is listening and watching is tucking in their pocket to take with them on this journey at whatever point they are in. I want to share another piece that we had gotten from one of our readers about, what they felt like they needed. And I also want to invite our panel to think about one piece of wisdom or affirmation that you want to leave people with this evening. And we are going to hear from our wonderful panel. But I also want everyone who is listening right now to share something that you would have wanted to hear while you were pregnant. Or maybe you are pregnant and it is something that you have heard that it's something you are repeating to yourself over and over again. It's something a friend or a family member shared. I would invite you to share that in the chat so that we can all share in this together. And so to help bring us to the end, Charlene, what's a piece of wisdom you want to leave people with tonight?
I would say that nothing is in black and white. There's a broad spectrum to everything, and just educate yourself. Get to know yourself, get to know your baby, whatever your support person. Make sure you have a supportive family or support system there for you, but most importantly is to educate yourself.
And Brandy.
Something that I say to my clients all the time is that calm is contagious. And so making sure that your environment is one that makes you feel calm, that your providers make you feel calm, that in postpartum you have people that are supporting you that create that sense of calm. That doesn't mean that you can't have your emotions and cry and have all the things that happen in the postpartum journey, but creating that sense of calm is also contagious to your baby. And so doing that and making sure the people around you are creating that kind of environment that you want, it's going to be great for you and great for your baby.
And I would say that to take it as a learning experience. Pregnancy and parenting is a learning experience. We don't have to get it right all the time, but we will learn as we go. And babies are great teachers because they communicate to us throughout all cycles of their life. And we just have to listen to what those messages are.
Thank you so much, Denise, Brandy, Charlene. Thank you for sharing a little bit from your mind and from your heart with us this evening. And I know that it has been beneficial to the people that are listening. And we also want to let people know where they can find your work. So we're going to drop some links in the chat so that you can keep up with all these wonderful folks and continue to learn from them as we have gotten to learn from them tonight. And we're just so grateful that you took the time to be here with us and to be in community together. As much as you all are out there and we're here, I think this has been a really special experience to be able to have this tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having this conversation.
And for everyone out there, one more call out, one more ask of you before you head off into your evening and eat something delicious or watch something that you've been saving. We would love to have you text Hey BB to 73224. First of all, that's going to be a way for us to start to answer some of the questions that we didn't answer here this evening because we got so many great questions, and also because it's going to be a chance for you to help shape a brand new project here that we're doing at KPCC and LAist. We are putting all of our journalism superpowers to use to help pregnant people and their families find answers to important questions about paid leave, the fourth trimester, childcare, and all that good stuff. So please join us in that journey. And if you're not pregnant and you know someone that is, we would invite you to welcome them into this with us. And we talked about how next week we are going to be hosting another one of these Ask Me Anything events related to COVID-19 and kids. That's going to be with senior health reporter Jackie Fortier. It is on June 8th, and we will drop the link in the chat where you can RSVP. And now I want to extend gratitude to everyone who made this event tonight possible. Thank you again to our guests who shared their time and expertise with us, but then also thank you to everyone in-house here at KPCC and LAist. The engagement producer for early childhood is Stephanie Retopper. KPCC and LAist education editor and my boss is Ross Brenneman. Our events team includes John Cohn, Rebecca Stemme, Kristen Payne, Alexis Giroux, and Tony Federico. all of these people had a hand in bringing you this event tonight. And thank you to everyone who watched tonight, who took the time to learn a little bit more about their body, about their pregnancy journey, about how to navigate the world with kids. You brought your insights, you brought your questions, and we are so grateful for it. Tonight's event was recorded, so when it's posted online, we will be able to share it out with the world to everyone who wasn't able to be here tonight. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.